Among the variety of alternate dimensions to have invaded core Earth, none of them are as horrifying or terrifying as the nightmarish realm known as Orrorsh. The shadow of darkness that descends upon this reality produces the most frightening atmosphere one can encounter in the Possibility Wars, a place where every shadow can be a death trap and the scariest of evils lurk within the deepest recesses of the human mind. Haunting this reality is the most destructive and twisted High Lord of all, the fearsome and ghastly Gaunt Man. His temptation and corruption spreads into all things it touches, and the very darkness is at his command. This devourer of possibility energy has devastated countless multiverses, and the cosm he originated from has been depleted into a black hole of emptiness and oblivion eons ago. Every dimension visited by this nihilistic force inevitably falls to ruin as the spread of his decay and destruction rots everything it comes into contact with from within. This heinous entity is without a doubt the most powerful High Lord in existence, and some say even more powerful than all other known reality raiders combined. No other High Lord would have ever considered an invasion upon core Earth, let alone gathering an alliance to attempt such an infiltration. The Gaunt Man has achieved what others would have thought impossible, a union of High Lords to harvest the richest source of possibilities in the Infiniverse, while resisting the feedback that would destroy the attacking cosm. It is fear of the Gaunt Man's power that keeps the other High Lords in check, for none are foolish enough to defy his plans, no matter the reason they might question his motives, especially since the incursion proved to be successful. The Gaunt Man is unquestionably the authority when it comes to the invasion of core Earth, and the other High Lords keep the peace among one another despite their differences in order to avoid the wrath of this dangerous ally should anything disrupt his schemes. This bargain is not without its benefits, though, as the harvest of possibility energy from core Earth is bountiful enough for all involved to profit from this endeavor, and so they remain content with their coalition for now. It has been a reoccurring strategy of the Gaunt Man to use his most recent acquisition as the spearhead towards invasion into his next campaign. Once a new target is chosen, the Gaunt Man begins maneuvering his minions into the chosen new territory before he completely voids his currently occupied domain. The most recent universe that this ancient monstrosity has conquered is called Gaia by its inhabitants, and they are the only cosm left that the Gaunt Man has infested that hasn't been completely eradicated by his evils. The last refuge of this world is the island of Victoria, a mirror of core Earth's Great Britain. There, the last remnants of this civilization, who call themselves Victorians, named in honor of their imperialistic queen who carved out an empire in their universe centuries ago, struggle against the horrors overwhelming them. These magisterial explorers had once colonized their entire planet in the name of their monarchy without realizing that their pompous self-righteousness was the true evil that they should have been fighting all along. Although they believed themselves to be moral defenders against the evils and wickedness of their world, their corrupted savior mentality and pursuance of their perceived manifest destiny kept them ignorant of their hypocrisies, as they refused to accept responsibility for their toxic ideologies, causing so many who sought to combat evil become just as wicked as the horrors they sought to oppose. It was the perfect environment for the Gaunt Man to introduce his variety of evil within, as he unleashed his assorted collection of beings, things, and creations gathered from countless other worlds upon the unsuspecting inhabitants of Gaia. Providing these sanctimonious vanquishers with a more dangerous enemy strengthened their steadfastness against wickedness, and this gave the Gaunt Man his opportunity to infect the minds of these subjugators and corrupt them into serving his schemes. Turning these zealots among one another as they became the monsters they so eagerly sought to defeat, the Gaunt Man used his horrors to manufacture and spread overwhelming anxiety and apprehension among the population as people grew suspicious of one another and slowly turned upon each other. Fighting their own, as well as the darkness, life on Gaia slowly eroded away until only a few remnants were left. As the horrors of their cosm closed in around these last human defenders, a reprieve occurred as the dangers receded and the Victorians learned that the Gaunt Man had become distracted by another world. Upon understanding the reason for the sudden absence of the murderous horrors of Gaia, the Victorians felt that they had no other choice than to traverse the maelstrom bridges, hunt down the darkness that had escaped their dimension, and save whatever world was on the other side from the terrors of the Gaunt Man. When the Gaunt Man brought his invasion to core Earth, it was done in the middle of the night, while a majority of the region slept. When his bridges of twisted, screaming undead corpses rooted themselves to core Earth, a wave of shadow filled with the most horrible monstrosities imaginable swept across the region as the reality storm surged with transformation. While the landscape twisted and reformed into a dilapidated Gothic environment filled with ruin and decay, the vibrancies of life began to recede away. The territory fell into collapse as structures reshaped themselves into unkempt buildings falling to ruin, while vegetation began rotting and dying wherever the storms passed overhead. There is little beauty left in this dismal and filthy environment as sickness and famine spread into the ever-increasing impoverished citizens that survived transformation. The invading cosm engulfed not just the subcontinent of India, but the surrounding regions such as Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, and half of Pakistan. The rains of the storms unleashed floods unlike the region had ever seen before, wiping out entire villages as they swept down the mountains and reduced the area into patches of settlement or washed out jungles separated by lengths of decimated countryside filled with danger and death. An incredible night of unimaginable panic was unleashed upon the unsuspecting inhabitants of the region during the first hours of invasion, when the assorted unspeakable horrors and most frightening terrors that our world has ever seen emerged from the dark. It wasn't just the recognizable monsters from lore, such as ghosts, vampires, werewolves, and living dead that arose from the black, but the malformed and indescribable abominations that were once inconceivable by the inhabitants of core Earth. As the environment altered into the realm of Orsh, the sweeping shadows unleashed the monstrosities contained within to terrorize one of the most populated regions of the world. Billions of people were subjected to this display of woe and misery, and the Night of Screams would become memorialized as the most terrifying event in the known history of our world. While the shadows began snuffing out as much light as it could, it spat out violence and dread as the creatures contained within killed and maimed in such vulgar displays that even those unlucky enough to survive such an encounter are permanently traumatized from the event. When dawn came, so did the Victorians to help care, console, and counsel the citizens of the terrorized realm of Orsh. General Avery Wellington organized the military and civilians of Gaia to cross the seemingly unguarded gateways into core Earth to assist and liberate the dimension from the Gaunt Man and his evils, abandoning their depleted homeworld to colonize and liberate this new frontier. Clinging to their centuries of knowledge and tactics in fighting the Gaunt Man's evils, their altruistic intent is clouded by their arrogant sense of superiority, despite the corruption lurking within their own ranks. Revealed to be a traitor to the people and an agent of the Gaunt Man, General Wellington was unmasked as a servant of the High Lord, leaving the Victorians scrambling for leadership. With a manhunt for the leader of the Gaians in effect, Lieutenant General Reginald A.B. Huxley assumed command of the Victorian expedition and the difficult task of bringing trust and redemption for his people to the citizens of India. Although the Victorians have the longevity and experience in fighting the abominations of their world, as well as many of the beings the Gaunt Man has introduced from other cosms, there are new creatures to fight in the realm of Orrorsh. Many of these new additions have manifested from core Earth's long history with its own unique brand of horrors, as India's superstitious philosophies have given birth to beings that resemble the Jinn or Rakshasa of lore. These recent demons are just as dangerous as their ancient counterparts, as many of these creatures require special methods to kill permanently. Learning how to completely destroy a monster and send it to its true death can be an arduous task that costs many lives to discover. Many Victorians have openly shared their knowledge regarding true death with core Earth's authorities and have begun expeditions to learn what they can of the new entities being discovered. The influence of corruption has manifested in a variety of forms, and one of the most obvious examples is the very landscape itself, especially the withered and dying vegetation scattered upon the muddy and murky earth, making travel away from a solid road grueling and fatiguing. The flooding from the reality storms pouring rain down the mountains etched out a terrain of swamps and marshes that drowned out most of the region, leaving behind desolation and starvation. Rural villages were wiped off the map, and those that survived became cut off from the rest of the region. Whatever plant life remained had been transformed into potentially dangerous breeds of flora that could harm or even kill unsuspecting victims. A variety of poisonous or infectious strains of deadly greenery manifested that spread their ailments in a variety of methods, from simple contact to targeted projectile ejections. Even more hideous are the animated species that can entangle or engulf unsuspecting prey, sometimes even acting as if they have some semblance of intelligence and communication with one another. There are rumors that entire bogs have come to life to trap travelers in their grasp, feeding off the bodies of those lost in their midst. Tales are told of twisted nightmare trees living in these graveyards that radiate the realm's evils by becoming Orrorsh hardpoints. Some have even claimed to have discovered dreaded dim thread trees that contain portals back to Gaia or other places far worse. Inhabiting this dismal terrain resides the mutated and corrupted zoology of the realm, lurking in the cracks and crevices waiting to make a meal out of any unsuspecting meat that appears within reach of them. Alterations to their biology have mutated most of the animal kingdom, making every lineage far more dangerous than they were previously. More than just a larger, faster, or tougher version, they are often accompanied with various venomous or infectious qualities that can be inflicted through numerous means such as biting, scratching, stinging, or even spitting. Not just visibly altered, many of these beasts are more than just a physical force to contend with, but are also cunning and stealthy in their revised forms and can be quite tactical in their hunts for victims. Alone or in small groups, these pests and vermin can be handled, but should one uncover a nest or encounter a swarm, overwhelming numbers can be just as deadly as any single oversized opponent. Further populating this unforgiving environment are the terrors and horrors that exist in a variety of forms to frighten and torment the struggling survivors trapped within the confines of the realm. Among the entities that cross the bridges from Gaia to core Earth is the assortment of unimaginable oddities harvested from ancient worlds devastated by the Gaunt Man's conquests, or beings familiar to its historical superstitions. This collection of terrible immigrants spread out across the realm, carving out haunts and killing fields to fester within, spreading fear and paranoia across the entire subcontinent of India. The more recognizable aberrations, such as ancient vampires and similar immortals, began forming coteries with the new blood from the territory. Packs of lycanthropes and other shapeshifters, such as bears, bats, and cats, grew larger, spreading their infections to the people of core Earth. A cacophony of mystics also traversed the bridges, such as mages, sorcerers, warlocks, and witches, who have established their secret circles and hidden covens to recruit any mortal willing to join their ranks. The most terrifying of these magical practitioners are those who delve into the occult and are by far the most powerful form of magic users in the realm. Death is not an end within Orrorsh, and those who have given up the mortal existence often become transformed into something else. Undead beings rising from the grave are only one type of unliving creature to encounter, as spirits tend to exist in a variety of forms, from immaterial ghosts to poltergeist-type harassment or even possession of a living body. Necromancers of all kinds research various methods to control these unnatural animations and phantoms, using the damned to do their bidding for them. Lovecraftian imaginations plucked from the devastated abysses and voids traversed by the Gaunt Man or manifested in the wake of the transforming reality storms have also made a home in the realm. These amalgamations and zygotes are twisted rearrangements of physiology that secret themselves away or blend into the environment so that they are often overlooked until they choose to reveal themselves. More frightening than the obvious monstrosities are the humans who mingle among the regular folk, hiding their corruption and wickedness. These chameleons can be any one of the previously mentioned devils by night, having no recollection of their sins by day. Even worse are those who have given in to their wickedness and mingle among the unsuspecting regular folk, plotting the violations of these innocents around them. The most common horror of the Gaunt Man is his most dangerous creation, the Gospog. These seedlings are planted in fields of corpses and grow into the lifeless shells as they mature. Once bonded to the decomposing body, the plant reanimates the remains and becomes a shambling mass of flesh and vegetation bent on destruction. Once a field is harvested, a new crop is planted that takes longer to cultivate, and the yield is half, but produces stronger monstrosities than the previous planting. This cycle can be repeated up to 5 times before the earth has become so depleted of usable nutrients that nothing ever regrows where a full harvest has been manufactured. Fifth-planting Gospog are appalling entities that are fierce and uncontrollable in their devastation. It was the gift of Gospog to the other High Lords that the Gaunt Man used as one of his enticements to convince the other reality raiders to join his assault on core Earth. Armed with this new weapon, the other High Lords began farming their own unique versions of these perversions, and each realm's crop distinctly represents their host's reality. While Orrorsh creates shambling, rotting, putrid corpses, Isles are more skeletal, wearing armor or even brandishing medieval weapons. Gospog from Darkworld or the Cyber Papacy tend to have wiring and metal integrated into their frame as well, and are distinguishable from one another by the Techno-Demon's twisted perversions versus the Cyber Church's tactical creations. The Nile Empire Gospog are reminiscent of mummies, and rumor has it that the pathogen in Pan Pacifica is a product of reverse engineering of the Gospog seedlings. The Gospog of the Living Land are more plant than flesh, and are the least humanoid-looking in appearance. Various hostile plant species intertwine with the host as it grows, and these dangerous combinations only make fighting these shambling hordes that much more threatening. Gospog from all realms can be covered in various oddities from barbs to bile, and are often seeping out some form of disease or poison. Guarding and monitoring this chaotic assembly are the powerful and dangerous lieutenants of the Gaunt Man. Obtained from forgotten cosms, these faithful agents ensure that the Gaunt Man's schemes are carried out without interference. One of the most powerful and capable species of these watchers are the Ravagons, great pterodactyl-like humanoids that can sense Storm Knights, their possibilities, and strip them away from their reality. The Gaunt Man will not hesitate to use these creatures to hunt down troublesome opposition, especially persistent Storm Knights. Darkness devices are also known to summon these warriors to defend Stele or protect their other investments. With an army of nightmares unleashed upon core Earth, the Gaunt Man's influence spread quickly, infecting not just Orrorsh, but all the other realms as well. With the other High Lords having secured their footholds, the Gaunt Man now makes preparations for the next stage of his invasion, a secret strategy that the other reality raiders grow suspicious of as they wonder what this ancient evil may have planned for their future. The dankness and bleakness of Orrorsh is a product of the various axioms working in unison to keep the population hopeless and frightened, while giving just enough ambition to the individual that they struggle to overcome their personal fears. The High Lord and his darkness device seek the possibilities generated in the struggle against his influence over the impatient annihilation of a potentially fruitful bounty. It is this delicate balance between being a survivor or a victim that the realm tests a person's mettle. The dreariness of industrial expansionism breeds a fog of soot and filth that seeps into every person's very soul. Overcoming this depressing environment takes fortitude and determination, and it is that courage that the darkness device feeds off of. The Gaunt Man keeps the technological influences suppressed at the age of gunpowder, where cannon artillery, Gatling guns, and repeater rifles are standard military issue. The High Lord allows for the devastation of mechanized warfare, but suppresses development from evolving nuclear advancements to prevent situations such as the Tharkold incident, a line that Mobius seems dangerously comfortable to perch on. Steam and coal power are abundant in Orrorsh, and electricity can even be found working in the right conditions. Telegraphs and the earliest of telephones are used to spread information, and the printing press is common enough that various circulations can be obtained throughout the realm. Jalopies putter behind the horse and wagon as the odd blimp or balloon is silhouetted in the gray clouded skies. This harsh environment divides the people within into an obvious class structure between the struggling peasants and the controlling wealthy. While the deplorables get sick and starve, the perfumed posh decadents dine in their ivory towers. The societal communities have enough understanding to formulate local governments, and taxation is used to fund the war effort. People work for their wages, and it is usually laborious and often dangerous. Private businesses can flourish, but often require capital investment or steady clientele. Slavery is not common in the realm, as it has been abolished by the Victorians, but wage manipulation skirts the line pretty closely, keeping the profiteers' bank accounts full. The development of the social structures and technological developments of core Earth caused the establishment to crumble like the environment around them as military tactics became forgotten and democratic ideologies eroded. This domestic regression was further emphasized by the Victorian imperialism that began securing fortifications and conscripting volunteers. This resurgence of colonialism has reignited a mistrust of foreigners as most civilians try to avoid strangers. The cultural divide imposed within Orrorsh is also reflected within their religious practices. Not allowing for direct divine interaction, the Gaunt Man keeps the spirituality of his domain limited to a ranged interaction without the threat of manifestations. This allows the endowed to cast miraculous wonders that spread hope and belief as the faithful look for converts to their theological practices. A bastardized interpretation of Puritan Christianity, these fanatics are not hesitant in their desire to burn whatever witch they can find as they brandish their divine power against the evils of the realm. These Victorian missionaries of the Cecellum are but one of the many practices within the region, but it is the fastest growing one since the invasion. Philosophies of all types have gained a surge in manifestation, and a variety of gospels preach their doctrines. Some practice openly given their sermons in the streets, such as the Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, and Sikhs of the areas, while others practice in hidden sanctuaries lest their impure devotion and alchemaic rituals be discovered. Demon cults and devil worshippers are not tolerated by the Cecellum, and any worshipper of immoral faiths are dealt with swiftly. The enchanted arts are also quite a powerful paradigm in Orrorsh, rivaled only by Isle's pursuance of mysticism. Magic precepts allow for blatant distortions of the material world as spellcasters of all types display their reality-bending knowledge. Enchanters from a variety of schools of wizardry spend their lives uncovering the secrets of mysticism to ward off and fight the torments around them. Like miracles, the Gaunt Man indulges his underlings to utilize the supernatural forces to enhance their persecutions, and occult magic is one of the most common forms practiced in the domain. This advanced level of esoteric study allows the predators of Orrorsh who have the knowledge and ability to travel between dimensions or teleport at will. This only increases the uneasiness of the citizenry as dangers seemingly come from nowhere or snatch victims into thin air. With the axioms held in check, the Gaunt Man sets the environment for his world laws to create the most devastation and despair in order to reap as many possibilities as possible from each individual. The law of eternal corruption blankets all things in a veil of personal horror more terrifying than any entity one can encounter in the possibility wars, the evil within. The entropy of decay seeps into all things, and it is not just the rotten decomposition of the landscape that withers and dies, but the spirit and mind of every occupant of Orrorsh. Despair and hopelessness are abundant in the realm, and struggling to survive the many random nightmares wears on an individual's sanity. Selfishly giving in to darker urges only brings about rewards as a person begins to benefit from their immoral behavior. Whatever the delinquency, acting upon the malfeasance will often be still the transgressor with an advantage that suits their indecency and assist them in further perpetuating such misdeeds. Corruption manifests itself within an individual through a variety of methods, and the Gaunt Man has crafted a setting that erodes optimism and ambition to further sweeten the road to depravity. Many give in due to exhaustion after years or decades of holding on to a futile struggle for peace and redemption. Not everyone resists the call to darkness, though, and those who eagerly and willingly seek out atrocity are empowered with enhancements and alterations that make them hardly human after being so tainted. The supernatural mysticisms of Orsh are not just available for the monstrosities of the realm to practice, but to tempt the innocent into using their powers for depravity. These endowments do not come without a price, as the further one goes down the path of damnation, the more disconnected to humanity they become, not just in mind, but in body. Mutations, mutilations, and scarification become obvious as the power grows, turning individuals into personal monstrosities of their own design. Going too far into vileness often leads to madness, as the insanity of complete submission to wickedness overcomes the abomination. It is the downward spiral into corruption that fuels the law of fear. Inhabitants of Orrorsh not only fear themselves and the cost of evil to their personal soul, but the goodness and mercy of those around them. Corruption is in all things in the realm, and that includes one's family and neighbors. Having others to trust is essential in the realm, and even those one has known for an extended period can suddenly turn out to be an unsuspecting twisted horror. Suspicion and paranoia of the new or unusual is often met with hostility or avoidance, as the potential for the unknown to be deadly is a lesson that is seldom learned twice. These personal immediate threats are nothing compared to the fear and apprehension of the corruption outside one's personal space. Most activity outside the home is conducted during the day, even though sunlight is a rare spectacle to behold. If it's not storming, cloudy, or foggy, it is smoky and polluted, and these thick mists can blow in or hang in the air, creating pockets of hazards and concealment. These risks are preferable by light, though, as one should not travel outdoors at night when the creatures of darkness walk freely to terrorize the populace. Those who have the courage and audacity to resist the persistent demoralization and constant angst of Orrorsh are punished for this daunting and withering endeavor. The law of perseverance curses those who have the will to overcome the anguish and desperation of the realm by making the struggle to survive it all that much more difficult. Whenever enemies of the High Lord attempt to soak damage inflicted upon them, it is much more difficult to achieve within the Gaunt Man's punishing dimension than any other reality encountered. Survival of the fittest is one of the most basic primeval natural selections in all the cosmos, and Storm Knights from Orrorsh exemplify this notion by being among the most steadfast and committed soldiers of the Possibility Wars. A diverse assortment of hunters and explorers crossed over with the soldiers and royalty from Gaia to continue their pursuance of the nightmares that escaped the cosm during the Night of Screams. These brave and daring defenders have formulated resistant cells and secret societies to thwart the High Lord's schemes and send his minions to their final death to bring peace to both the living and the dead. Faithful followers of the Seselim, or even core Earth's denominations such as Swamis, Imams, monks, and Sikhs, have obtained divine power during transformation and can cast miraculous wonders as their devotion to a deity is rewarded with powerful displays of a celestial's influence and capabilities. Magic is just as easy to manipulate and learn as miracles, and finding methods to learn the mythical ways is not difficult if one knows where to look. Spellcrafting is just as much a science in this realm as other academia, and there are institutions that specialize in empowering the enchanted in their arts. Gunslingers and weaponsmiths create a diverse assortment of armaments and ammunition to wreak havoc upon whatever adversary they encounter. These specialized arsenals can be blessed or enchanted to cause even more damage to an opponent or to capture them for study or interrogation. Whether you are a veteran from Gaia who has been fighting the evils of the Gaunt Man your whole life, or are a recently transformed resident of Earth who escaped corruption and retained their humanity instead of succumbing to the horrors around you, you have forged a constitution to be a spark of light in the darkest of realms. Facing the most obscene and destructive antagonists the Possibility Wars has to offer, Storm Knights from Orrorsh have a fearless disposition as they forge the courage to defeat the greatest evil one can encounter: their own dark thoughts and desires.
You should never have come here!